program. With the increase in population, Pakistan's urban scene has also transformed, and there are a lot more cities coming up, and already existing cities are expanding. But this expansion is very unplanned, leading to many problems. Today, we have with us two very senior architects who practice and teach in Belgium but have spent a lot of time in Karachi. Welcome to the program, Asiya and Christophe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And first of all, I would like you to introduce yourselves a little bit, beginning with Asiya.
Okay. So my name is Asiya Sadiq. I'm a Pakistani architect from Karachi. All my education, architecture education, first degree was done in Karachi. Then I came to Belgium at the KU Leuven University to do a master's in architecture. And that's where I met Christophe, my husband. And then we went back to Pakistan, set up a practice. And I was also teaching at the NED University as associate professor for around 12 years. In fact, I've taught longer than that. And then we came back to Belgium in 2012, and I started teaching at the KU Leuven, and we again set up a practice here in Belgium where we do projects on architecture, research, urban design. So our practice sort of spans the different scales of architecture.
Yes, so, well, Asiya already said most of the things that I'll be saying also. It's very parallel, the only difference being that I'm a Belgian. I was born here in Brussels. I studied architecture here also. And I did a master's in urban planning and human settlements where I met Asiya, after which we went to live in Pakistan for 12 years, where we both had our practice. We also worked for almost 10 years with renowned architect Arif Hassan, with whom we did a lot of projects in terms of research and architecture. So since 10 years, we are in Belgium. We are still teaching, which we were doing over there also. We're teaching mostly about not particularly architecture as such, but very much on topics such as urban design, urban planning, and collective spaces. So our interest, which has really been developed further also in Pakistan, we continue to create links with our experience that we had in Pakistan.
For example, the studios or the elective courses that we've been, or theoretical courses that we both actually have been teaching in Belgium have a lot to do with our experience in Pakistan. So I've been running a design studio on South Asian megapolis cities called hyper transformations in the global south, and I've been working on Karachi as a case now for almost 10 years. Similarly, Christophe has taught courses which are centered on the global south. So over the years, we've realized that there's not that much knowledge, especially on the South Asian urbanization processes and the kind of hyper transforming big cities like Karachi that we have in that region. So that's we feel our contribution to the knowledge scene on urbanized or like urban studies here in Belgium. And people, students, but also the universities really seem to kind of benefit from that experience that we bring from Pakistan and especially Karachi.
Because interestingly, there's a bit, I mean, Brussels is a city with a lot of migration happening because it's really the center of Europe, geographically speaking. And so the lessons learned in Pakistan are actually very relevant here in Brussels. So it's interesting to see that the Pakistani expertise becomes very relevant in a Western context. But I don't know how to deal with the informal economy, for instance, or the informal sector as much as we.
So you have been living in Karachi and you have a lot of interest in Karachi. Would you like to, and also in Pakistan as a whole, so would you like to explain a little bit about the current scene of urbanization in Pakistan?
Okay, so like Christophe was mentioning, we have me as a student and later on as a professional work very closely with architect Arif Hassan, who's like an authority on urbanization, urban issues in Pakistan. And later on at the university, I also did a lot of research in these issues. So the current situation in Pakistan has its roots, of course, in the way things have transformed or how urbanization has happened in the country. And a lot of the issues that we see on a daily level, of course, have their roots in overpopulation. And if we take the example of Karachi, a lot of it has to do with the various immigrant waves that we have seen coming into Karachi from post-independence, independence in migration from India to Pakistan, later on from East Pakistan to West Pakistan, then due to the Afghan war, the Afghan refugees. So Karachi is a kind of melting pot of a lot of cultures, and that creates a very hybrid sort of form of urbanization. But that's the case in a lot of other cities in Pakistan as well, because most of these cities are inhabited by rural urban immigrants. And they bring with them their own set of values, their own way of living, lifestyle, which is often in conflict and clash with the way state looks at the making of cities in a very formal, top-down, modernistic way of organizing cities. So I personally feel, and I've been researching on that in my PhD project as well, that if we do not recognize through research the changing ground realities of urbanization, because urbanization and city making is not a static process. It's not like one plan will be applicable for all times to come and all problems to be encountered, but it has to be constantly updated. And the ground realities, bottom up, informal, have to be incorporated with the formal sector policies for them to be effective. So that's like kind of the general take on urbanization and how one can maybe come up with better solutions.
So would you like to throw some light on the problems arising due to this kind of unplanned urbanization, particularly in terms of health, environment issues, and also access to facilities and other things? And what were your observations about these?
To do with sustainable cities, we always have to look at the populations, and there's now actually, it used to be about three things, which was economy, social, and ecology, but recently in the literature or also in the practice, the cultural aspect has been brought in. So these problems that our cities face have a lot to do with overpopulation. It has to do with the lack of research and extension of ideas, especially from the professional side, inclusive of practicing architects and planners, but also the academic institutions. Political influence tends to supersede the plans and projects which are made. In fact, with new liberalization, globalization, planning in a way is out and projects are in. So often you have master plans, like for Karachi, we have a development plan and a master plan in place, but it's completely trampled over by international capital, by new projects coming in. And then the local government, because of this, the kind of branding the city for attracting foreign investment, tends to forego the priorities of the larger master plan and goes for random mega projects. So this, of course, creates a lot of tension at the ground with communities, because often communities are evicted, which leads to a lot of loss of assets. There's a lot of mental health issues which come out of that. There's, of course, a lot of political discord and chaos which the city sees as a result of these things. So if we want sustainable Pakistani cities, if we want Karachi as an example to be a sustainable economic engine, we have to take along the ecological, social, and cultural aspects which go into the making of the city, and we have to respect the ground realities, the community, the bottom-up practices for a happy, harmonious, well-developed city.
Yeah.
Maybe you want to add?
Maybe I can just give a few examples of these kind of problems that we have been facing in Karachi. Like there has been this period where there was a massive construction of flyovers. Now, a flyover, I think, is a perfect example of a project kind of approach, because the advantage of a flyover is that it can be built in 1 year. So whoever the decision maker, they can very quickly impress the people that are doing something, and people are suffering it because they're stuck in traffic jams. So they like physically face to face with that development, but politicians use it as a branding tool, basically, to build this 1 year projects, which with a quick result and attraction. But unfortunately, climate, for instance, and social change is not something which works in periods of 2-3 years. It's something which one has to envision over the next 30, 40, 50 years. We all know that if we do tree plantation, it's not going to make a difference within a year. It's going to make a difference maybe after the next elections. So that means a lot of courage of politicians, of course, to plan something which is maybe costing a lot of money and will not show any result within their tenure. So it's a bit the price of democracy that one is paying. And that is because of this relatively quick turnover of decision makers that there's a difficulty of having this very forward-looking kind of approach to planning. And planning has to be very forward-looking. One has to be able to take decisions which only the next generation will benefit from.
Yeah.
So in terms of popularity, it's not the best, easiest thing for politicians to adopt.
Mm-hmm. But the fact of the matter also is that in hyper transforming cities like Karachi, changes are coming so fast, but also it's not just the politicians who are shaping the city. I mean, 65-70% of the city housing stock and building stock is coming from the informal sector. So while the politicians are busy making policies sometimes, which are maybe more long-term and following some kind of a more glamorous image, in the meanwhile, the city is transforming, changing, and growing at a much rapid pace and in a completely different direction. So I think the reconciliation of the two is very, very important, and a dialogue is very, very important between these bottom-up practices and the top-down sort of planning approach, which planners and architects and politicians tend to follow.
Actually, there is a famous architect, Danish architect Jan Gehl, who has this saying, which I think is a very powerful one, where he says that planning should be about humans first, and then the environment tailored to their needs, not the other way around. And very often it happens in parallel, making complete abstraction of what the humans are. And that also reminds me of the book written by Arif Hassan, The Unplanned Revolution, where it's all about this invisible kind of revolution which is busy happening for the last 20 years, how the society is completely changing and it's very different from what politicians or decision makers have in mind.
Yeah.
So they're between catering to a group of people who doesn't exist anymore.
But this is kind of an unbridled kind of growth that is taking place. Now so much has been done, and cities have actually grown into, unplanned jungles of concrete. Is there anything which can still be done to improve the situation?
Yes. I mean, we're both optimists, Asiya and me, so we all otherwise we would not be teaching also, I think. if you would not be a bit optimistic. We both feel that these big infrastructure projects, which have very often been planned and built without any, without taking into account the people living along those big infrastructural elements, that through a few modifications of this infrastructure, these can actually become elements which can really structure the city in a positive way. Like we've done a lot of work on the nalas, the open sewers in a city, which has very often been considered as a problem in the city by the engineers and by the civil servants and politicians. So there would very often be an approach of turning those nalas or covering them, hiding them. But we've been working on projects where these nalas actually become like green lungs of the city, where you take advantage of the fact that you can easily have pedestrian banks along those nalas, that they cross throughout the city, throughout different towns, so they can really become like a backbone structure for the whole city, which already exists. So very often one has to look at those elements which are considered as issues or problems as something which can really help redeveloping the whole city.
I mean, we have this kind of tagline which we always use in our projects and also with our students, which is how can you take a problem and turn it into a potential? And through so many projects done over the years by ourselves in our practice and by our students, it has been proven that you can turn problems into potentials, and you do not necessarily need foreign aid or trillions of millions of dollars to be able to do so. You can actually use local resources, human, financial, administrative, and managerial to be able to do so. But of course, what is required is a change in the professional mindset. It's not many architects and planners who would agree with what we are saying, and it's also requiring a change, or rather an increased political will to support this kind of a thinking of not just getting rid of the problems, but actually finding potentials in those problems. It also requires institutional strengthening. It requires the civic bodies to be strengthened, their human resource capacity, especially the technical capacity, to be more updated with how things can be done, and not the way the colonials or even the post-colonial bureaucracy has been doing it over the years. Because a lot of the planning standards and the planning principles that we follow to date in Pakistan and many post-colonial countries is embedded in kind of pre-independence charters or constitutions. So we need to do research and change those and adapt them to the current realities which countries and cities in South Asia like Pakistan and Karachi are facing. So that, I think, are the sort of ingredients required to come up with a new paradigm of urbanism. So it's not that we are inventing it. There are many people, there are many architects, planners, researchers, but more importantly, there's a global network of community networks and sort of bottom-up practices where all of this is already happening. And thankfully in Karachi, we have some organizations like the Orangi Pirate Project Research and Training Institute. It's quite a well-known development project, or the Urban Resource Center Karachi, who are part of these networks and who kind of work with these organizations. And because we have been a part of those, and we are still in touch and partner in their activities, we feel, not just because we are idealists or we think everything can improve, but we know that globally such practices exist, and they exist in Pakistan as well. So what they require is recognition to start with, and then they require a systematic recording of their problems and potentials in any sector, be it housing, infrastructure provision, education, health, economy, informal economy, pavement economy. And then the most difficult, I guess, is the redistribution of power and redistribution and relooking at how we view the city and how we view all the stakeholders in a city.
You are referring to a lot of innovation and diversification of approach. Do you suggest something from we can take from the practices in Belgium that could be helpful in Pakistan? And I think also Christophe tried to take some of his students to study Karachi. Was that project successful or not? What is happening along those lines?
Yeah, we've had various experiences with either Pakistani architects working in a Western context or vice versa. Actually, more vice versa. So we had more experience of European students working on the case of Karachi, and it was. I mean, Asiya also has a lot of experience with her studio that has been running on Karachi. So there's some very interesting ideas which are coming up, and I think it brings us back to the point that it's important to be able to look at the problems from a different angle, because I've been living in Karachi also for 12 years, so I was sometimes also very close to the reality and the problems of Karachi. And the advantage of those students who have sometimes never been to Karachi, might never go also, that they will look at what we consider as problems as something really fantastic and full of potential. I mean, just for myself, I remember that when I came to live in Karachi, Pakistan, I was really amazed by the informal economy in Sadr in Karachi. While all my colleagues, architects in Karachi, they were all frowning and say, "This is such a mess, Sadr. It's such a chaos. There's nothing good about it." But actually, both Asiya and me, with Arif Hassan, we did quite a bit of research on how these hawkers and street vendors, how they were operating, and we realized that they were really not a problem. They were not the root cause of the traffic that was running there. They were not the root cause of solid waste, not at all. So there were huge misconceptions about these hawkers, and we've been trying very hard to. We also succeeded in a few pilot projects where we actually turned this informal thelawala as like the hero of the story and the main actor of urban redevelopment, and not as a problem.
Yeah.
So
I think this taking a distance is definitely an advantage, which the Belgian students or the international students who work with us here on the issues of Karachi. And talking of what one can learn from what is happening in Belgium at the urban planning level or at the urban design level, it's interesting how the same kind of resistance one finds to any kind of new idea. So you might be familiar, recently Brussels has done a lot of, Brussels government has done a lot of cycle highways or like cycle tracks, and they've turned a lot of areas pedestrian, and they have seen so much resistance because people are used to going everywhere there with their cars. It's also a kind of generational thing, but I think it's also a mentality that you live in the suburb and you go to the center with your car, you park it somewhere, and when it becomes difficult, you kind of react to that. But I think they've been very steadfast, the Brussels government, which is a Green party government at the moment. They have really changed the city with very minimal infrastructure. They're, just the provision of these cycling paths and these pedestrian areas, no car areas have really changed the whole character of the city, but also in a good way. People feel much more drawn, especially the younger people feel much more drawn go into Brussels. And then in Flanders, in Antwerp, this green highway, which was made around the city of Antwerp, that saw years of resistance as well. And so what I'm trying to say is that whenever there is a new idea or a new planning paradigm which comes to the fore, whether in Belgium or in Pakistan or any other country, there are many interest groups who get a kind of resistant attitude to it. You know, the car manufacturers do not, of course, like such ideas, and similarly the shopkeepers or other commerciants and so on. So the important thing is, given climate change, given these big issues like pandemic that we have seen recently, cities and citizens and planners and politicians, I think they have to kind of become sensitive to the fact that some things which may be difficult to do at the short term, or new, or nothing that has been done before, in the long run they actually bring much more benefits. Just these cycling paths will help people become more healthy, and there'll be less car pollution and biodiversity and things like that. So I think those are the sort of ideas we've always also brought to Karachi in our teaching, but also in our practice. There are several projects where people would actually say to us, but the real life projects in our office, and they would say, why do you even get involved with all this extra things around your architectural projects? And we said, because we believe in it, and we feel that you can't just be looking at one building. You have to look at the area around it, you have to look at the city, and you have to take responsibility for even the smallest intervention that you're doing as a professional. So I think that's the kind of common one can find in both the cities.
Is there anything else that you would like to add to your very enlightening insight into city planning and urbanization in Pakistan?
Oh, we could talk for hours if you wish. We're happy to talk about these elements
Topics,
of
yeah.
life and topics. It's
I think most of it we really spoken in detail, but I think at the end of the day, the world and the times that we are living in, we just cannot continue to hang on to old practices. And I think COVID taught us all that we need to change, and even climate change is such a big reality right there in our faces, no matter where we are in the world and which profession we belong to. So I think this kind of interdisciplinarity and a thinking, professional thinking, or even citizen thinking, which is going beyond just the material gains that one can take out of the city, but also about values and preservation of common human sort of values is something very important, and should be at the basis of any profession, including planning, architecture.
But I think this time where like 70s and 80s, where there was this big need of specialists who were really specialized in one aspect of life or planning, that time is finished. So now it's much more about collaboration. That as architects, I mean, we don't like to call ourselves just architects because we feel that we also need to be a bit anthropologists, we need to be a bit sociologists, we need to be a bit of an economist, we need to be a bit of an ecologist.
Sometimes not a designer, just a facilitator. Not necessarily coming up with a product all the time, but sometimes just facilitating a process.
Yes, developing strategy.
It's a holistic approach that is needed, and
Absolutely. There is no other way of doing things. I mean, and if you do it otherwise, it is usually unsustainable and unsuccessful.
And I think it's the same for many professions, where it doesn't remain just that that the doctor also needs to be able to more and more look at other aspects which are not really part of his training, to be a good doctor. And same with engineers, landscapists, economists. They one needs to have a comprehensive approach in all aspects of life, actually.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for such an enlightening discussion. And it is a very, very important topic for Pakistanis and for our future generations, which needs a lot of attention. And I hope that the kind of work you are doing will contribute towards improving things in Pakistan. Your input may be realized at least some level. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you.
Thank you for inviting us and for listening to us. Thank you.
Thank you.